In the dim, flickering light of a medieval study, a young scholar named John Duns Scotus sat hunched over a pile of manuscripts, his mind racing with complex ideas that would soon challenge the very foundations of medieval philosophy and theology. The year was 1300, and Scotus was on the brink of a revolutionary theory that would reshape the way people understood causality and the divine. Scotus began by exploring the intricate web of cause and effect, delving into the question of how one event could necessitate another. He recognized that in some cases, the connection between cause and effect was not as straightforward as it seemed. For instance, he observed that certain conditions, which he called naturally necessitating dispositions, could be essential for an effect to occur, even though these conditions did not directly cause the effect themselves. This was a departure from the traditional view that causality required an active, direct involvement. Scotus argued that in such cases, the cause of the disposition C1 and the disposition itself E1 were instrumental causes of the final effect E2, even if they did not actively produce it. He used the example of a piece of wood being heated by a fire. The motion of the wood C1 and its warming E1 were necessary for the wood to catch fire E2, even though the wood's motion and warmth did not directly cause the fire. The fire itself, with its inherent properties, was the true cause. Scotus extended this idea further, applying it to the realm of sacramental causality. He noted that while natural causes, like fire, could produce effects through their inherent properties, the effects of sacraments, such as the grace received in the Eucharist, could not be explained by natural causes. Instead, the connection between the sacramental act and the grace received was established by the divine will. The divine will, he argued, endowed the sacraments with a naturally necessitating disposition to produce grace, even though the sacraments themselves did not possess the causal power to do so. To illustrate this, Scotus drew a parallel between natural signs and sacramental signs. Just as the word human being signifies a rational mortal animal by a conventional agreement, the sacraments signify and produce grace by a divine institution. The sacraments, he argued, were not natural causes, but were given a definitional connection to grace by the divine will. This connection was not based on any inherent causal power, but on the ordered intentionality of the divine will, which ensured that the sacramental act would be followed by the grace it signified. Scotus's theory was not without its challenges. He had to address the apparent disanalogy between natural causes and sacramental causes. While natural causes operated through their inherent properties, sacramental causes relied on a voluntary, divine institution. Nevertheless, Scotus maintained that the essential dependence of the effect on the cause, whether natural or sacramental, was grounded in the ordered intentionality of a higher cause. In the case of sacraments, this higher cause was the divine will. Scotus's ideas were later refined and critiqued by his contemporaries, including William Ockham. Ockham, while agreeing with Scotus's distinction between natural and sacramental causality, introduced the concept of sine qua non causality. He argued that the sacraments were necessary conditions for the reception of grace, even if they did not have the causal power to produce it. Ockham's view emphasized the role of the divine will in establishing the necessary connection between the sacramental act and the grace received. The debate over sacramental causality was not just a philosophical exercise. It had profound implications for the practice of the Church. Scotus and Ockham's theories helped to clarify the nature of the sacraments and their efficacy, providing a theological foundation for the belief that the sacraments were not just symbolic acts, but were truly efficacious in conveying grace. As the sun set over the medieval study, Scotus's ideas continued to resonate, challenging the thinkers of his time and shaping the future of philosophical and theological discourse. The revolution in causality had begun, and its ripples would be felt for centuries to come. In the debate over the nature of the sacraments, two important thinkers, John Basilides and Franciscus Marinus, disagreed with both John Duns Scotus and William of Ockham. These two scholars, who were contemporaries of Ockham, argued that the sacraments do not have the power to directly cause grace or the real presence of Christ. They believed that only natural, efficient causes can truly produce effects, and the sacraments do not fit this category. Basilides insisted that for something to be a real efficient cause, it must have the power to produce an effect, and must actually use that power to bring about the effect. According to Basilides, the sacraments do not have the power to produce grace or the real presence of Christ. Therefore, they can only be called causes in a metaphorical sense. Basileus criticized Scotus's attempt to consider sacramental causality as a subtle and defensible idea, but ultimately found it to be incorrect. He supported the assistance theory, which holds that the sacraments can be called causes of grace or real presence only in an improper or figurative way. Marinus also argued that the sacraments do not have the power to produce any effects in the soul. He explained that the term cause can be used in different contexts, such as in nature, art, politics, and hierarchies. In nature, a cause is something whose existence leads to an effect, or something that gives and conserves being. In art, a cause is something that receives the first effect from the principal agent, like an axe being swung by a carpenter. In politics, a cause is something that leads to an effect through legislation, such as a law that makes a certain action a crime. In hierarchies, a cause is something that operates according to laws set by an authority, such as a judge's decision based on legal code. Marinus argued that only natural causes, as in the first category, are real causes. He believed that the sacraments do not act as natural causes, but rather as political or hierarchical causes. This means that the sacraments do not have the power to produce effects in the same way that natural causes do. Instead, their effects are dependent on the authority and laws established by God. For example, when Christ gave his disciples the power to heal and exorcise demons, it was an authority given by a higher power, not a natural causal power. Applying this to the sacraments, Marinus concluded that the sacraments do not have the power to cause grace or the real presence of Christ in a natural sense. Instead, their effects are understood in the context of God's authority and the laws he has established. This aligns with Basileus's view that the sacraments can only be called causes in a metaphorical sense. This debate highlights the complex relationship between faith and reason in medieval theology, particularly in understanding the nature and effects of the sacraments. Both Basileus and Marinus sought to reconcile the theological understanding of the sacraments with philosophical principles, leading to a nuanced view of sacramental causality that emphasizes the role of divine authority over natural causation. In the Christian faith, the transformation of bread and wine into the body and blood of Christ during the Eucharist is a profound mystery. To understand this, we need to explore how this change can happen without breaking the rules of nature and logic. Imagine a loaf of bread on an altar. Before the consecration, it's just bread. After the consecration, believers say it becomes the body of Christ. But how can this happen? How can the body of Christ, which is in heaven, suddenly be on the altar without moving from its place in heaven? One obvious explanation might be that the body of Christ moves from heaven to the altar, but this doesn't work. If the body of Christ moved, it would have to leave heaven and travel through space to get to the altar. But the doctrine teaches that the body of Christ never leaves heaven. Moreover, the body of Christ can't be in two places at once, and it can't move to multiple altars simultaneously. Another idea might be that the bread changes internally, like when bread gets stale, but this doesn't work either. The bread's physical appearance and properties remain the same, so it can't be an internal change. To solve this puzzle, Aquinas, a famous medieval theologian, proposed a new kind of change called transubstantiation. This is a transformation where the entire substance of the bread is converted into the entire substance of the body of Christ. The bread's physical appearance, its color, taste, and texture remains, but its substance is completely changed. Transubstantiation is different from other kinds of changes. For example, when water turns into ice, the water molecules change form, but they are still water. In transubstantiation, the bread is not just changed in form. It is completely converted into the body of Christ. The bread's substance is entirely replaced by the substance of Christ's body. This change is not like a normal transformation where something changes, but keeps some of its original parts. In transubstantiation, the bread's substance is completely gone, and the body of Christ's substance takes its place. The bread's physical properties, like its color and taste, remain because they are not part of the substance, but are just the way the bread looks and feels. Aquinas also addressed the question of how the body of Christ can be present in multiple places at once. He explained that the body of Christ is not physically in the bread in the same way, a physical object is in a place. Instead, it is there in a special way, through the power of the sacrament. The body of Christ is present in the bread, but not in the way that a physical object is present in a place. It is present in a way that does not conflict with the idea that it is also in heaven. To explain this further, Aquinas used the concept of natural concomitance. This means that things that are naturally connected to the body of Christ, like his soul and divinity, are also present in the bread, but not in the same way as the body itself. The body of Christ is the main thing that is converted, and the other parts are present because they are naturally connected to the body. In the Eucharist, the bread is transformed into the body of Christ, but the body of Christ is not literally in the bread in the same way a physical object is in a place. Instead, it is present in a spiritual and sacramental way, which does not violate the rules of nature or logic. This explanation helps us understand how the body of Christ can be present on the altar without moving from heaven, and how it can be present in multiple places at once. The transformation is a unique act of God's power, beyond the normal rules of nature, but it is a change that can be understood through the concept of transubstantiation. In the discussion of the Eucharist, Thomas Aquinas and Giles of Rome both grapple with the mystery of how Christ's body can be present in the bread and wine during Mass. They explore the nature of this presence, and how it can be understood without contradicting the principles of logic and physics. Aquinas explains that for something to be definitively in a place, it must fit the place in a way that matches its size or power. For example, a 2-cubit body cannot be definitively in a 1-cubit place, and the soul is not definitively in the hand because it extends to other parts of the body. Angels, however, can be definitively in a place because their power is only active in that place at a given time. Applying this to the Eucharist, Aquinas argues that Christ's body is not definitively under the bread because it can be present on multiple altars at once, and does not fill the place in the way a physical body would. Christ's body is present in the bread, but not in a way that fills space or can be seen or touched. When the priest moves the consecrated bread, Christ's body does not move on its own. Rather, it moves with the bread because it is present in the bread in a special way, not by filling space. This presence is also why Christ's body is not visible or affected by physical actions like breaking or tearing. For Christ's body to be affected in these ways, it would need to be present through its physical dimensions, which it is not. Instead, it is present in the bread in a way that preserves its spiritual and substantial nature. Aquinas also addresses the concern that Christ's body, if present in this special way, might lose its organic structure. He explains that the natural concomitance of Christ's bodily accidents like dimensions and shape ensures that his body remains structured and does not become a disorganized heap. This concomitance means that Christ's divinity, soul, and bodily accidents are present in the Eucharist, not by the power of the sacrament itself, but by their real union with Christ's body. Giles of Rome, while agreeing with much of Aquinas' framework, delves deeper into the mechanics of transubstantiation. He notes that the process is different from natural changes because it involves God's direct action, not just the natural processes of matter and form. In natural changes, like turning air into fire, there is a common material basis that changes form. However, in transubstantiation, there is no such common material basis. Giles explains that God can convert one substance into another by acting on the matter in a unique way. Unlike natural agents, which can only act on quantified matter with distinct parts, God can act on matter as a quiddity, a fundamental, indivisible essence. This allows God to convert one substance into another, without the new substance being a new creation. For example, God can turn the bread into Christ's body by acting on the bread's matter in a way that makes it become Christ's body, even though Christ's body already exists elsewhere. This approach solves the problem of how Christ's body can be present in multiple places without being extended or divided. By acting on the matter as quiddity, God can make Christ's body present in the bread without violating the principles of size and location. Thus, the Eucharist remains a profound mystery, but one that can be understood through the unique and powerful action of God. The doctrine of transubstantiation, as articulated by Thomas Aquinas, presents a complex philosophical and theological challenge. At its core, transubstantiation is the belief that during the Eucharist, the bread and wine are transformed into the body and blood of Christ. However, this transformation raises several questions, particularly about the term to which of the change. Aquinas asserts that the term to which of transubstantiation is the substance of Christ's body, but not his soul, divinity, or accidents, which are present by natural concomitance. This leads to a deeper inquiry into the nature of substance and form. Giles of Rome, a medieval philosopher, attempts to address these issues by making several distinctions. He begins by clarifying the meaning of the term body. In theological discussions, body can refer to three different things. 1. The three dimensions themselves, which are quantities and not substances. 2. The composite of matter and the form of corporeity, which is a substance, or three matter alone, organized and under the form of a soul. When theologians say that the term to which of transubstantiation is the body of Christ, they mean the third sense, matter organized and under the form of a soul. Giles then introduces a distinction between things, res, and modes. According to Giles, a thing cannot change its category, but it can have the mode of another category. For example, knowledge is a quality, but it can have a relational mode when it is related to the knowable. Similarly, matter, which is pure potentiality, can have a quantitative mode when it is extended by quantity. This means that the matter of Christ's body, while still matter, can be extended and divided into parts, making it a body in the sense of organized matter. Giles argues that the term to which of transubstantiation is the matter of Christ's body, taken in its quantitative mode. The bread substance is converted into this matter alone, without the substantial form, the intellectual soul, or the quantity of Christ's body. However, the substantial form and quantity are present by natural concomitance, meaning they are naturally united with the matter. This union prevents the matter from being pure potentiality and keeps it divided into parts, thus maintaining its identity as the body of Christ. Giles also addresses the problem of how the body of Christ can be present in multiple places simultaneously. According to standard philosophy, two bodies cannot occupy the same place, and one body cannot be in multiple places at once. Aquinas and Giles propose that the body of Christ is present in a special way, not by its own dimensions, but by the dimensions of the bread and wine. This is called per accidens location. Giles explains that this special presence does not violate the principle that two bodies cannot be in the same place, because the body of Christ is not related to the altar by its own dimensions, but by the dimensions of the bread and wine. To further clarify, Giles distinguishes between different ways a body can be in a place. A body can be definitively in a place, if its quantity is commensurate with the place. It can be circumscriptively in a place, if its quantity is compared part to part with the place. It can be determined to a place, if it is related to the place by a finite magnitude that is not its own substance. The body of Christ, Giles argues, is determined to the altar places, but not definitively or circumscriptively, because it is not related to these places by its own dimensions. Finally, Giles addresses the issue of how the body of Christ remains an organic body on the altar. He introduces a distinction between quantitative position, the order of parts to one another, and to the whole, and categorial position, the order of parts to place. The body of Christ can have a quantitative position, with its parts organized in the correct order, without having a categorial position, meaning it is not related to the place by its own dimensions. This allows the body of Christ to be present in multiple places without losing its organic structure. In summary, Giles's analysis provides a philosophical framework for understanding transubstantiation, addressing the complexities of substance, form, and location. By making these distinctions, he aims to reconcile the theological doctrine with philosophical principles, offering a coherent explanation of how the body of Christ can be present in the Eucharist.